Keep your children out of sight or they learn their place the hard way.
They have a fever. This will help. Don't let her know.
Why would you risk your job for us?
Because they're my kids too.
Who are you to speak to me this way?
A man who's done hiding.
Adeolu, it's really you.
Always was.
What if the person you rejected as worthless turned out to be the only one who could save you? What if every tear you cried in darkness was being counted by someone who never stopped watching? The story you're about to hear will shake everything you believe about love, betrayal, and second chances. A woman pushed to the edge of survival, a man hiding behind rags to protect the family he lost, and the moment when truth explodes like thunder, leaving no one unchanged. If this story grabs you even a little bit, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next will blow your mind. Now, let's dive into a night that changed everything. The Lagos sky burned orange as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Ikoyi mansion. Amara knelt on the cold marble floor of the grand foyer, her hands raw and trembling as she scrubbed away at a wine stain that seemed to have soaked into the very soul of the expensive Italian tile. Her back ached, her knees screamed, but she kept scrubbing because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering everything she'd lost. "You call this clean?" The voice cut through the air like a whip, sharp, cold, merciless. Madame Chinai stood at the top of the spiral staircase, her silk wrapper flowing behind her like the robes of a queen. Her face was carved from stone, beautiful but deadly. Her eyes scanned the foyer with the precision of a hawk hunting prey. I can still see the stain. "Are you blind or just incompetent?" Amara didn't look up. She had learned not to. Eye contact only made it worse. "I'm sorry, madam. I'll fix it right away. Sorry." Madame Chinai descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Each click of her designer heels echoed like a countdown. "Sorry doesn't pay for ruined floors. Sorry doesn't make up for your uselessness. Do you know how much this marble cost? More than your entire miserable life is worth." Amara's fingers tightened around the scrub brush. Her nails, cracked and bleeding from weeks of non-stop labor, dug into her palms. She bit down on the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. Because if she spoke now, if she dared to defend herself, she'd lose the only job keeping her children from starving. Behind the heavy oak door that led to the servants' quarters, two small faces pressed against the frosted glass. Twins, 5 years old, a boy and a girl with wide eyes that had seen too much suffering for their age. Adana clutched her brother's hand tightly. Her lips moved in a silent prayer. "Please God, don't let her hurt Mama again." Beside her, Chidi stood frozen, his small body trembling. He'd stopped crying months ago. He'd learned that tears only made the bad people angrier. Madame Chinai reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped directly in front of Amara. She crouched down, her perfume so strong it made Amara's eyes water. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Amara slowly raised her head. Their eyes met. In Madame Chinai's gaze, there was no warmth, no humanity, just cold calculation and contempt. "You have 2 children, correct?" Amara's heart stopped. "Yes, madam." "And you want to keep them safe, fed, and housed?" Her voice was silk wrapped around a blade. "Then you will work harder. You will stop making mistakes. You will remember that I own this house, I own your job, and I own you. Do you understand?" The words hung in the air like poison. Amara wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up, to spit in this woman's face, to tell her that no one owns another human being. But instead, she whispered the only thing that would keep her children alive. "Yes, madam." "Good. Now clean this floor again. Properly this time. And when you're done, the kitchen needs scrubbing, the bathrooms need bleaching, and the laundry needs folding. You'll finish by midnight, or you won't eat tomorrow. Neither will your children." Madame Chinai rose and walked away, leaving Amara kneeling on the cold marble floor like a woman praying at an altar of suffering. The door to the servants' quarters creaked open. Adana and Chidi ran to their mother, wrapping their small arms around her neck. Amara's tears finally came, silent and hot, streaming down her cheeks as she held her babies close. "It's okay," she whispered. "Mama's okay." But they all knew it was a lie. Outside, beyond the tall iron gates that separated the mansion from the rest of Lagos, A man stood in the shadows. He wore faded jeans and a torn shirt that smelled of earth and sweat. His hair was unkempt, his face hidden beneath a scraggly beard and a battered straw hat. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another poor man searching for work. But his eyes told a different story. They burned with an intensity that could cut through steel. He watched the mansion with the focus of a predator studying its prey. He watched the lights flicker in the servants' quarters. He watched the silhouette of a woman kneeling on the floor, and his hands clenched into fists so tight, his knuckles turned white. Soon, he whispered to the night. Very soon. The next morning arrived with the cruelty of routine. Amara woke at 4:30, her body protesting every movement. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours. After finishing Madame Chinese impossible list of tasks, she'd stayed up mending her children's clothes by candlelight because electricity in the servants' quarters was rationed. 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. Just enough to remind them they were human, but not enough to let them forget their place. She splashed cold water on her face from a bucket. The plumbing in their tiny room had stopped working 2 weeks ago. Madame Chinai said she'd fix it when Amara earned enough to pay for repairs, which meant never. Mama, Adana's small voice came from the corner where both children slept on a thin mattress. Are we going to eat today? Amara forced a smile. Yes, my love. Mama will make sure of it. But even as she said the words, she didn't know if they were true. Yesterday, Madame Chinny had cut their food rations again. Punishment for the wine stain. Now they had only 2 cups of rice and a small piece of dried fish to last 3 days. By 5 o'clock, Amara was in the kitchen preparing Madame Chinay's elaborate breakfast: freshly squeezed orange juice, scrambled eggs with imported cheese, toast with French butter, sliced mango, and coffee so expensive it cost more than Amara's monthly salary. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but she didn't dare touch a single crumb. Last month, the previous housemaid had been caught eating leftover bread. Madame Chinai had her arrested for theft and made sure she never worked in Lagos again. At exactly 6:30, Madame Chinai swept into the dining room, her silk robe replaced by a designer business suit. She sat at the head of the long mahogany table without acknowledging Amara's presence. Amara served the breakfast in silence, setting each plate down with trembling hands. Is the coffee hot? Madame Chinai asked without looking up. Yes, madam. Good. And you will take the children to the back garden today. I have guests coming this afternoon. I don't want them seen or heard. They are an embarrassment. Something inside Amara cracked. Her children were not an embarrassment. They were beautiful, smart, kind. They were everything good in this terrible world. But she swallowed her rage and nodded. Yes, madam. At 7 o'clock, Amara led Adana and Chidi through the back door into the sprawling garden. It was a paradise of green lawns, blooming hibiscus, and towering palm trees. The children ran ahead, their laughter like music after so much silence. For a few precious moments, Amara let herself breathe. Out here, away from Madame Chinay's watchful eyes, she could almost pretend they were free. Beautiful morning, isn't it? The voice came from behind a row of hedges. Amara spun around, her heart pounding. A man stepped into view. He was tall, but moved with the hunched posture of someone trying to appear smaller. His clothes were worn and dirty, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat and an unkempt beard. He carried gardening tools and a small watering can. Who are you? Amara asked, instinctively stepping in front of her children. The new gardener, Mom. Name's Kwame. Madam hired me yesterday to fix up the garden. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I didn't know Madam hired anyone new. She fires people more than she hires them. Kwame shrugged. Maybe she finally realized the garden was dying, just like everything else in this place. There was something about the way he said it, not casual, deliberate, like he knew more than a gardener should know. Amara frowned, but said nothing. She turned back to her children who were chasing butterflies near the fountain. Your children? Kwame asked, moving closer. Amara tensed. Yes, they're beautiful. Strong faces. They look like fighters. What a strange thing to say. Amara glanced at him, trying to see past the dirt and disguise. Who talks like that? But before she could respond, Adana ran over, breathless and smiling. Mama, look, I found a ladybug. She held out her tiny palm where a small red insect crawled across her skin. "That's wonderful, my love." The ladybug flew away, and Adana watched it go with the kind of pure wonder only children possess. Kwame crouched down to her level. "Do you know what ladybugs mean?" Adana shook her head. "They mean good luck is coming. Even when things are dark, the ladybug reminds us that light is on the way." Adana's eyes widened. "Really?" Kwame's voice softened. "Really. And I think your family is due for some very good luck." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about this man, something familiar in the cadence of his voice, the shape of his hands, the way he looked at her children with an emotion too deep for a stranger. "Who are you?" she asked again, more forcefully this time. Kwame stood, his smile fading. "Just a gardener, Mom, trying to survive like everyone else." But his eyes told a different story, and for the first time in 5 years, Amara felt a flicker of something she thought had drowned in that ocean storm. Hope. 3 weeks passed. Kwame became a fixture in the garden, always working quietly, always watching. Amara noticed he arrived early and left late. He fixed broken sprinklers, replanted dying flowers, and restored the garden to a beauty it hadn't seen in years. But more than that, he was kind to her children. He brought them small gifts: a smooth stone shaped like a heart, a flower crown made from jasmine, a wooden toy carved from driftwood. Every time Adana and Chidi saw him, their faces lit up with joy. And every time Amara saw him watching her from across the garden, she felt that strange pull again, like her soul recognized something her mind refused to accept. One afternoon, Madame Chinny hosted a garden party. Wealthy friends, politicians, business moguls. They gathered on the terrace, drinking champagne and laughing while Amara served them in silence. She was invisible, a ghost in her own life. "Bring more wine," Madame Chinny snapped, "and make sure your filthy children stay hidden. I don't want my guests thinking I run a charity." "Yes, madam." Amara hurried back to the kitchen, her face burning with humiliation. But as she passed through the garden, she saw Kwame standing near the fountain. He wasn't working. He was watching the party with an expression of pure contempt. When their eyes met, he nodded once. A silent promise. That evening, after the guests left and Madame Chinny retired to her room, Amara sat on the back steps with her children. They were exhausted, hungry, but together. "Mama," Chidi asked quietly, "will things ever get better?" Amara opened her mouth to lie, to give him false hope. But before she could speak, Kwame appeared from the shadows. He sat down beside them without asking permission. "They will," he said firmly, "because people who hurt others always pay in the end. Justice might be slow, but it never forgets." Amara stared at him. "How would you know?" "Because I've seen it," Kwame replied. "I've lost everything, just like you. And I've learned that the universe keeps score. The people who broke you will answer for it." Tears burned in Amara's eyes. "Who are you really?" But Kwame just smiled, stood up, and walked back into the darkness. That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with questions. There was something about Kwame, something in the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he looked at her children with a father's eyes. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. 5 years ago, before the storm, before the ocean took everything. She remembered strong arms holding her, a deep voice whispering promises, a love so fierce it felt unbreakable. She remembered the night she told him she was pregnant, the way his eyes filled with tears of joy, the way he knelt and kissed her belly and swore he'd protect them forever. And then the storm, the sinking ship, the Coast Guard telling her they'd found no survivors, the funeral with an empty casket, the months of grief so deep she thought she'd drown. And now this gardener with his strange words and familiar eyes. No, she told herself, it couldn't be. Her husband was gone. The ocean had taken him. This was just wishful thinking born from desperation. But deep down, in a place beyond logic, she wondered. The next morning, everything changed. Amara was cleaning the living room when she heard Madame Chinny's voice, loud and furious, coming from the study. "Who do you think you are, questioning my business practices? I'm calling security right now." Amara froze. She crept closer to the door, her heart pounding. Through the crack, she saw Madame Chinai standing behind her desk, her face twisted with rage, and across from her, standing tall and unafraid, was Kwame. But he didn't look like a gardener anymore. His posture was different, confident, powerful. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer humble. "You should have been more careful, madam. When you exploit people, you leave evidence. Financial records, witness testimonies, documented abuse." He stepped forward, pulling off his hat. "And sometimes the people you think are beneath you turn out to be watching very closely." Madame Chinai's face went pale. Who are you?" Kwame reached up and tore off the fake beard. Amara gasped, her knees buckled. She gripped the doorframe to keep from collapsing, because standing in that study, his face now fully visible, was a ghost. Her husband, Obina, the man she'd buried 5 years ago, the man she thought was lost forever. He was alive, and he was standing in Madame Chinai's office like an avenging angel. "My name is Obina Okafor," he said, his voice like thunder. "Billionaire, shipping magnate, and the man whose family you've been torturing for the past 6 months." Madame Chinai's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Impossible. You're dead." "I was," Obina replied coldly. "But I came back. And now, madam, you're going to answer for every tear my wife cried, every meal my children missed, every moment of suffering you caused." Amara pushed the door open. Her legs moved on their own, carrying her into the room. Obina turned, and their eyes met. 5 years of grief, loss, and longing crashed between them like a tidal wave. "Obina," she whispered, his face crumbled. "Amara." And in that single word, spoken with a voice breaking under the weight of everything unsaid, the world stopped. Madame Chinai tried to run, but Obina moved faster. He blocked the door, his expression cold as ice. "You wanted to know who I am? I'll tell you. I'm the man who spent 5 years hiding from criminals who wanted me dead. The man who had to fake his own death to protect his family. The man who searched every corner of Nigeria to find his wife and children. And when I finally found them, when I discovered they were working as slaves in your house, I became the gardener. Because I needed to see the truth. I needed proof. And now I have it." He pulled out a small recording device. Every insult, every threat, every crime. All recorded, all documented, all going to the authorities today. Madame Chinai's face turned gray. "You can't do this. It'll ruin you." "You already ruined yourself," Obina said quietly. "I'm just making sure the world knows." Security arrived moments later, but not Madame Chinai's private guards. These were federal agents. They walked in with badges and handcuffs and read Madame Chinai her rights, tax evasion, human trafficking, labor exploitation. The list went on. She screamed and cursed as they dragged her away, but no one listened. The mighty had fallen. When the house was finally silent, Obina turned back to Amara. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "I know," Obina said, his own voice breaking, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't come back sooner. But I had to wait. I had to make sure it was safe. And when I found you here, suffering like this, I wanted to burn this place to the ground." But he stepped closer, gently cupping her face. "You taught me patience. You taught me that justice is sweeter when it's done right." She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. He held her like she'd shatter if he let go. "Mama?" A small voice came from the doorway. Adana and Chidi stood there, confused and scared. Amara pulled back, wiping her tears. "Come here, my loves." The twins ran to her and she knelt, holding them close. Obina crouched beside them. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch his children's faces for the first time. Adana looked up at him, her young eyes studying his face. "Are you the gardener?" "I'm more than that," Obina whispered. "I'm your father, and I've been searching for you since the day you were born." Chidi tilted his head. "Our father is in heaven." "Mama said so." Obina looked at Amara, his eyes glistening. She nodded through her tears. "I had to tell them something." He turned back to his children. "Your mama was right to tell you that. I was lost. But now I'm found, and I promise you, I will never leave you again." The days that followed were a blur. Obinna moved his family into his penthouse in Victoria Island. The children ran through rooms 10 times the size of their old quarters, laughing and shouting with joy. Amara stood on the balcony overlooking the Lagos skyline, still trying to process that her nightmare was over. Obinna joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dreaming," she admitted. "Like I'll wake up back on that cold floor." "You're not dreaming," he said gently. "This is real, and you're safe now." She looked at him, really looked at him. The lines around his eyes were deeper. His shoulders carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "What happened, Obinna? Where have you been?" He took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was transporting cargo worth millions. Dangerous men wanted to steal it. They sabotaged the ship. Most of the crew died. I survived, but barely. I washed up on a remote island. By the time I was rescued, those men had put a price on my head. So I disappeared, changed my name, lived in hiding, but every single day I searched for you. I hired investigators, followed every lead. And when I finally found you," he paused, his voice thick with emotion, "and saw what you were enduring, I knew I had to be patient. I had to gather evidence to destroy everyone who hurt you." Amara reached for his hand. "You could have just taken us away." "I could have," he agreed. "But then Madame Chinai would have found other victims, other women to exploit, other children to starve. I had to make sure she paid. Completely." Amara's throat tightened. "I thought I was alone." "You were never alone," Obinna whispered. "I was always watching, always protecting, even when you couldn't see me." They stood together in silence, the city lights twinkling below like stars fallen to earth. 1 month later, the courtroom was packed. Madame Chinai sat at the defendant's table, her designer suit replaced by prison orange. Her lawyer argued and pleaded, but the evidence was overwhelming. Financial fraud, human trafficking, assault. Obinna's recordings played for the entire court to hear, her voice, cold and cruel, condemning her with every word. The judge delivered the verdict with no hesitation. Guilty on all counts. 20 years in prison. Madame Chinai's scream echoed through the courtroom, but Amara, sitting in the front row with her children on either side, felt nothing but peace. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed. Obinna gave a brief statement, his arm around Amara's shoulders. "No one should ever suffer the way my family suffered, and anyone who exploits the vulnerable will answer for it. I don't care how rich you are, how powerful you think you are. Kindness and justice will always win." The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted questions, but Obinna turned away, leading his family to the car. That evening, they gathered in their new home. A real home with laughter and warmth and safety. Adana and Chidi played with their new toys, their faces glowing with happiness Amara had thought she'd never see again. Obinna found Amara in the kitchen making dinner. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I love you," he whispered. "I never stopped." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you too. Even when I thought you were gone, even when the world tried to break me, I carried you in my heart." They kissed, soft and slow, a promise renewed. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of their children's laughter, they both understood something profound. Evil might be powerful, but love is stronger. Cruelty might wound, but kindness heals. And sometimes, the people you think are broken are actually the strongest warriors of all. 3 months later, Obinna stood before a crowd of journalists, community leaders, and former domestic workers. He had just opened the Amara Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to protecting domestic workers' rights, providing legal aid, and prosecuting abusive employers. Amara stood beside him, no longer the broken woman scrubbing floors. She was a warrior, a survivor, a voice for the voiceless. When she spoke, the room fell silent. "For years I was invisible, treated as less than human, but I want every person suffering in silence to know this. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone." The applause was deafening. Obinna looked at his wife with pride so deep it ached. She had survived hell and emerged stronger. That night, as they tucked their children into bed, Adana looked up at her parents with those wise eyes. "Mama, Papa, are the bad people all gone now? Obinna knelt beside her bed. The bad people are in prison, my love, and we're making sure no one else gets hurt the way we were hurt. Chidi yawned. So we're safe forever? Forever, Amara promised, kissing his forehead. They left the room, closing the door softly. In the hallway, Obinna pulled Amara close. You know what the best part of all this is? She smiled. What? We didn't just survive, we won. And she knew he was right, because in the end, justice was just about punishment. It was about healing. It was about taking back your power. It was about proving that even when the world tries to crush you, you can rise again, stronger, fiercer, unbreakable. Years passed. Adana and Chidi grew into confident, compassionate young people. They understood suffering because they'd lived it. But they also understood hope because their parents had shown them that love conquers all. Amara became one of Nigeria's most respected advocates for workers' rights. She spoke at conferences, changed laws, saved lives. Obinna used his wealth not just to build businesses, but to build futures for people who'd been forgotten. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he revealed himself, they returned to that garden. The place where a disguised billionaire pretended to be a gardener. The place where a broken family began to heal. They stood by the fountain, holding hands, watching their children play. This is where it all changed, Amara said softly. This is where I stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. Obinna squeezed her hand. And this is where I learned that real strength isn't hiding behind money or power. It's standing beside the people you love, no matter what mask you have to wear. They looked at each other, and in that gaze was everything. Pain and healing, loss and reunion, despair and hope. Because their story was just about revenge or justice. It was about the unbreakable bond between two people who refused to let the world destroy them. It was about a father who disguised himself as a poor man to save his children, a mother who endured hell to keep her family alive, and two kids who learned that even in the darkest night, dawn always comes. The garden had never looked more beautiful. The flowers bloomed brighter, the fountain sparkled in the sunlight, and somewhere in the distance, a ladybug landed on Adana's hand. She laughed, showing her parents. Look, good luck. Obinna smiled. The best luck we could ever ask for. And as the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Okafor family stood together. Whole, healed, home. So what did we learn from this incredible story? That monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear designer suits and smile while they destroy you. But we also learned that heroes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they come disguised as gardeners, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. And most importantly, we learned that no matter how dark your night gets, no matter how powerless you feel, justice is coming. Love is stronger than hate. Truth is more powerful than lies. And the people who hurt you will always pay. Always. We hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought. Hit that like button if you believe in justice. And subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Because the best tales are the ones that remind us we're never truly alone. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop fighting for what's right.